Evening, Scott.
Thank you for that. I was just going to check my speakers to make sure that they were on. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's doing the same.
Yep. Good evening, Mike. I'm going to apologize first off. I was a little late getting the blast out. I have been under the weather since Saturday. I'm like really out of
Sorry to hear
sorts.
that.
So it comes and goes. I don't know exactly what it is. I've never gotten a diagnosis in over 20 years. It's either somewhere between um, um, an extreme gastritis, cyclic vomiting, IBS. I don't know. It's something to do with my digestive tract. And basically, starting Saturday, my system decided to evacuate everything. I lost 15 pounds,
Holy
15
crap.
pounds in 3 days. And finally, today, I was able to start getting some liquids and a little bit of soup in me. So I'm starting to feel better. But for the most part tonight, as we get started, I'm going to throw it in your lap and let you have at it. I hope you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. Thank you for letting me
Cool.
present.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. I did not get a chance to preview it. I do apologize again on that. I've just been so out
Okay.
of sorts, but I've got faith in you. I'm sure it's going to be a great presentation. I'm looking forward to it. Um,
I'm just always worried that I'm going to be going the wrong way for you guys or, just redundancy. I just wanted somebody, this group, which has a much greater knowledge of cannabis, of course, to give me input since I'm teaching, veterans that are very unknowledgeable.
that's actually awesome. I'm sure once you're finished up, there's going to be a number of comments, and then I'm sure our crew will be happy to give their input.
That'd be awesome.
All right. Where are we at here? We are at 7:02, which is our usual start time. So I guess I'm just going to get my little disclaimer up here and get ready to go. Make sure we're on YouTube. Yep. All right. I want to start by saying welcome everybody who to join me tonight with the South Carolina NORML Cannabis Conversation. My name is Scott Weldon. I am the Executive Director of the South Carolina chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. All of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness and are not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. So again, I'd like to start by welcoming everybody who's here on the call with me. I also like to welcome anybody who might be watching our live stream on YouTube, and also welcome anybody who is watching it as a recording later on YouTube. As I mentioned YouTube, I always like to point out that we are not monitoring the YouTube stream or the comment section on YouTube. So if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns and you're watching on YouTube, please leave your comments, questions, or concerns after YouTube's done rendering the video, usually about 24 hours or so. We will come back and visit it and try and address your questions, comments, and or concerns. All right. Again, I'm just going to real quick apologize for my being a bit out of sorts tonight. Health issues are health issues, but that's coming around. And we're very excited tonight to have a presentation by Michael Harvey. And Michael is going to be talking to us tonight about medical cannabis in South Carolina, safety, efficacy, and its use. Now, this is a program he's developing for the veteran population. So most cannabis naive patients may not know some of this information. So it is an educational piece. He is giving a run through for us tonight, and I think it's great. We'll have an opportunity to post this for him, but he is going to be starting to share this presentation. He can tell us a little bit more about it, but I believe he said at with vets, obviously with veterans. So with that, I'm just going to sort of leave it up to Mike to get us started here, introduce himself, and tell us a little bit about his presentation, and then have at it.
Good evening, all. Hope everybody's doing well. As I get this this presentation shared, I just wanted to share it with you guys because you're the brains of cannabis, that I've been interacting with. I will be presenting this to a veterans organization on the 15th, and future ones, and I would just love your input on, something doesn't make sense, you think I'm doing something wrong, statements are incorrect. I would love your input. So my information's on the very end. Please don't worry about hurting my feelings. All right, so you should be able to see my screen, which currently has all the cool little pictures from our hemp days. Somebody can validate that you can see it. Awesome. All right, so let me. All right, so this presentation is the medical cannabis in South Carolina, safety and efficacy in its use. Most of you know me. I'm a nurse educator, a veteran, and a veteran patient. So, which at this point is just going kind of half-assed. All right, so those of you who don't know me, I've been a registered nurse since 1993, Army Nurse Corps officer since 1996, spent 40 years in a very wonderful job that I got tired of not having First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment rights. So you know where we're at. All right, so I'm going to quickly cover the agenda of the tragic history of cannabis. This was the name I came up just to cover the screw-ups our federal government's had. The endocannabinoid system. Should we believe in all the hype behind CBD and medical cannabis? Cannabis as a medicine, medical and legal implications. Talk a little about Senate Bill 150. Most of our veterans aren't very much aware of the Senate bill, which is now a House bill, and what you should be looking for when choosing a CBD or medical cannabis product. Because this is for the veterans, we lose 22 veterans per day to suicide. One veteran every 3 days in South Carolina. So we posted the number to call should you be having any issues and need to talk to somebody. So the important thing to get across to the public and our patients are that CBD and THC come from the same general plant. It's of course the cannabis plant. The difference that it makes, is it hemp or is it marijuana according to the streets, is that percentage of THC in the product. So cannabis covers all products from CBD-derived hemp to cannabis that has been grown with high THC levels. And both CBD and THC act similarly, but affect different receptors. Both work phenomenally better when used together, synergistically. Want to state that whenever using any cannabis product, start low and go slow. If you've never used cannabis, it can kick your butt if you use it wrong. All right, so most of the people that I've talked to, the first thing they think of when you talk about uh, cannabis is the bong. We're out there to get high. That's the only thing they see. They don't see somebody sitting down and having sublingual THC or sublingual CBD or capsules. They only see us getting stoned. The cannabis stigma has led us to believe that the use of cannabis is entirely to get stoned. All right, cannabis and its history. So cannabis, as we know, has been known by many names: ganja, marijuana, Mary Jane, weed, and others. But in the end, it's the same cannabis plant with names added by those who either utilize it, such as Mary Jane, or those that are trying to vilify it, Harry Anslinger. Cannabis has been used as a medicine for thousands of years. I've seen numbers from 5,000 to 8,000 years. From the 1850s to 1942, cannabis was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia, which means it was a medicine that was approved by the American Medical Association. And I mean, it was used for virtually everything. However, in 1937, we know that Harry Anslinger and the rest of the prohibitionists worked on the Marijuana Tax Act, which was voted in and approved by the president, which then put a tax on production of THC or hemp from every level. So the farmer, the physician, it just became too expensive. Thus, in 1937, hemp farmers quit growing hemp, which is interesting because in 1942, with the war starting, the United States had a huge need for hemp. So from 1937 to 1942, this devil's lettuce, this horrific, plant, we actually imported all of our hemp needs from Manila and other countries. But Manila, they were blockaded during World War II, so we actually had to start growing hemp for ourselves to support the war effort. And the Department of Agriculture put together a documentary to help bring farmers back into hemp production to help the war effort. I don't have the video linked here, but if you just look up Hemp for Victory, it is a wonderful video if you haven't seen it. Goes to show that one side of their mouths, our politicians and our country will tell you how wonderful it is, and in the next, they'll tell you how bad it is. Continuing in cannabis history, in 1955 to 1975, there was the Edgewater Aberdeen experiments. You can look this up on va.gov and put in Edgewater Aberdeen experiments, and you will see that 6,700 service members were used as guinea pigs. They were volunteers, mind you, but they were still guinea pigs, in which they were given, depending on what group you were in, there was 250 chemical agents that were used on this population. So they received things such as mustard gas, sarin, all the way to LSD, PCP, caffeine, alcohol, and of course, cannabis. And these were synthetic cannabinoids, but so they gave our service members cannabis, but at this point, it was still a bad thing. 1970, our Congress and the president signed in the Controlled Substance Act, which placed marijuana in a Schedule I drugs, substances that are, or chemicals that are defined as having no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. I'll cover this a little bit later. It's amazing after all the years of research that we still see this drug in a Schedule I and not in a Schedule II or higher, or more appropriately, totally left alone and not in a scheduled drug at all. 1978, United States versus Randall. Robert Randall was busted while growing cannabis on his deck of his condo on its balcony, and he was, him and his wife were locked up, put in jail. They were released, and they opted not to actually pay the fines and stuff. They actually went to court and won against the federal government in this case number that you can see, 171F3D195, and in which the government now was responsible for providing Robert Randall with his medical prescription. This was 300 cannabis cigarettes each month, so roughly 10 per day. He started receiving these in the late 70s and received them all the way through his death in 2001. 1985, the FDA approved two drugs. These are synthetic THCs, dronabinol and Sesmet. And then in October 7, 2003, the Department of Health and Human Services actually drew a U.S. patent, which was approved, 6630507B1, clearly stating that cannabidiol as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant. I bring this up primarily because as a veteran and with a lot of other veterans that have received head injuries, there is decent amount of information out there and research that shows that cannabis could be utilized as a neuroprotectant in head injuries. Why the government hasn't gotten online yet. We do know that the NFL is starting to look at this, which is very interesting. 2018 Farm Bill, and the FDA approves the drug Epidiolex, which is CBD, pharmacy grade, but no different than typically what you get with a good artisanal CBD. It's just we know what's in it to 100%. The best news of my life is on January 21st, 2022, the South Carolina State Senate begins to open the debate on medical cannabis. So we talked about Robert Randall. Robert Randall's picture's on the lower right. Another gentleman that I spoke with on the phone a couple of weeks ago is Irvin Rosenfeld, who is the only living cannabis patient who is still receiving his 300 cigarettes, or he's authorized to still receive his 300 marijuana cigarettes every month. He was somewhere in the first 3 or 4 patients to be admitted to the federal government's IND new drug program, which was a compassionate access. So in this process, the NIDA cannabis, which is of course grown by the University of Mississippi, would put all the stuff in a little baggie or whatever. They shipped it to a site in which the cigarettes could be rolled, which happened to be Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. And then through the pharmacy system was then mailed to these patients along with a number. I've seen varying numbers. We know there was a total of like 32 patients that were on this program, but most of the last ones from the late 90s, early 90s and late 90s were put on dronabinol versus the actual plant medicine. So the endocannabinoid system is where we run into the problem. We know that it's documented. We know it's been researched. We know it's there. Unfortunately, our healthcare system doesn't. Our pharmacology systems doesn't. It's just those people that take that extra time to go out and learn. So the endocannabinoid system was discovered in the early 90s by researchers attempting to discover how the heck THC affects the body. Dr. Raphael Mechoulam was one of the primary leads in that. There are a number of others, but he's the one that it's accredited to. Your endocannabinoid system encompasses the entire body. Some areas of your body, such as your brain, has more receptors for THC, where like the skin cells and immune cells are more for the CBD type receptors. This is a retrograde signaling system with a responsibility for homeostasis. The endocannabinoid system is taught in less than 15% of the US medical schools, which is really scary when you're trying to get assistance from a physician and they, one, have not been trained in school, and two, most of these physicians will not continue to get educated in a field like this because it's theoretically is illegal by the federal government. Now, a state can say yes, but a physician still has the risk of losing their license if they get involved in cannabis past recommending it. But even then, there's some potential legalities. I actually go to the third oldest pharmacy school that's in the United States. Not as a pharmacist, but I'm going to their master's in science, medical cannabis sciences and therapeutics. This pharmacy school does not even teach their pharmacy students about the ECS. There is no cannabis training in their school until if they should choose to take the herbal class, which you would assume that there would not be that much cannabis taught. Should I believe all the hype behind CBD and medical cannabis? No. Ensure you're gathering your information from trusted resources and not tabloids, Facebook, or hearsay. And God forbid, don't listen to law enforcement. While there is substantial evidence to support the use of CBD and medical cannabis to treat several conditions, it is not a miracle drug. Unlike FDA-approved medications or those drugs produced using the good manufacturing practice, such as your vitamins, many CBD companies tend to be fly-by-night companies. The picture that's on the right side of your screen talks about phytoremediation. And if you're not familiar with this, in short, anything that's in your soil, the plant is going to suck up through its roots and incorporate into its plant. So if your backyard is laced with lead, mercury, pesticides, that will be in your plant. Now, if you're growing your own, you should already know your soil, but the fear is that those companies that are out of the United States or companies that are growing it but also using pesticides, this may not be taken out of your product by the time you buy it. So you always want to look for a third-party lab result. Cannabis as a medicine. I put these pictures on here because, again, most of our people who are listening and that are not cannabis savvy automatically continue to look at the bongs. That's always the big thing. We do know as users of cannabis that we have sublingual, we have, oral, you can put it sublingual, I already said that, rectal, you can use skin. There's so many different routes. And some of these routes actually add benefits that we'll talk about shortly. Each route utilized provides relief at different intervals. Many cannabis users will utilize multiple delivery methods, such as waking up and maybe you put on a lotion onto your hands that contains THC and CBD, and at the same time you put a pill or maybe take a a quick vape. Like all medications prescribed and over the counter, there is a risk of drug-drug interactions. So again, you need to do a lot of research and you need to talk to your providers, pharmacists, cannabis nurse educators, and hope that these people actually have an understanding about cannabis as a medicine and not just the stigma that's out there. I won't go into bioavailability very much. It's a little bit over for most of the patients that I speak to, but the goal of this slide is to explain to them that depending how you take this medicine will depend how much medicine you actually are going to have available in your body, and that by vaporizing it or smoking it is going to be one of your best bets. What medical conditions benefit from medical cannabis? Now, as individuals that have studied it, we all know that there's a large amount of known uh, conditions that we can use it for, but unfortunately, until the FDA and there's research, you're almost it's just anecdotal. You got to be really careful. But we do know that with epilepsy, such as Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, that we have Epidiolex, which is again CBD purified, that was approved for the use of these epilepsy conditions in 2018. There still hasn't been a lot of successful post research where I was hoping that we'd see more by now. Interesting enough on the epilepsy, so I've been trying to follow a number of research articles and presentations. The percentage of children with epilepsy also having autism disorder is actually like nearing 40%. And they are finding that CBD is beneficial, even with a little bit of THC um, in autism spectrum disorders. All right, we know that chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting um, is one of the reasons back in 1985 that the FDA approved dronabinol and Sesamet for appetite decrease in for these people losing weight, nausea, and vomiting. And then we move into research, and we can see that the treatment of chronic pain was established as being a verified condition by the National Academies of Science. Yeah, I just forgot. Oh, engineering and uh, medicine. I apologize. And that was published in 2017, which also stated that uh, spasticity related to multiple sclerosis was beneficial with use of CBD and THC. And then improving short-term sleep issues. Again, there is ongoing research on the PTSD. Canada and Israel are, of course, our biggest being legal cannabis countries. And then we currently have a research project that's going on in San Diego at the VA Medical Center utilizing CBD. They still are using their primary medications. They are still being seen by therapists in talk therapy and CBT therapy and stuff like that. We won't see those results for another couple of years, unfortunately. Cannabis side effects. So you know that we continually are told that it's going to rot your brain. You're going to have amotivational syndrome and not want to research and learn and go to school. Yeah, I took my CBD before I came out here, and it helped to relax me, but I'm still able to do my freaking job. All right, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the following adverse effects are seen with cannabis use. Now, I like to use the NIDA documentation because you can't really argue with a federal entity that's actually done so much research and to prove how bad cannabis is. So, of course, you have altered senses. For example, seeing bright colors. I've read, they also have on there that, more attuned to music and relaxed and giggly and happy. I would love to be giggly and happy. Altered sense of time, changes in mood, impaired body movement, difficulty with thinking and problem solving, impaired memory, hallucinations, but that's with higher doses, delusions when taking higher doses, and psychosis, which that risk is highest with regular high potency use of marijuana. None of us do that, right? We're all, Additional side effects seen are drowsiness, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Not that big. They're actually very rare. And as you continue to use the plant medicine, these things actually dissipate and fade. The only major concern that I've seen is that cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which unfortunately there's no valid research stating how many patients using cannabis actually end up with cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And for the most part, that's because when you go talk to your doctors, you go in there with abdominal pain and they start saying, well, it's your gallbladder. Most of them either don't know that cannabis can cause this, and a lot of patients are fearful of mentioning it to their provider. This syndrome actually can be potentially lethal. It's all based on dehydration and on electrolyte shifts. But again, the numbers are actually very, very small. And these are users that are typically male, typically younger, and typically using extremely high doses of THC, shatter, and the like. Now, why is cannabis potentially a better option than current medications? All right, there are no documented cases of cannabis overdoses resulting in death. Not a not a single one. Now we have had deaths relating, to people drinking and driving and smoking marijuana or just smoking marijuana. So if you're going to be out there smoking, let's not drink and drive, not smoke and drive. The amount needed to result in a lethal dose is not really attainable with a normal use. You literally have to sit down. Oh my God. I think the only way that they were able to kill an animal was IV route. So obviously the dog or cat or whatever they were using wasn't smoking it. Cannabis can be titrated by the patient to the maximum dose. You wake up in the morning, your pain's only a 5 on a scale of 10. Maybe normally you take 5 big hits. Well, maybe today you only take 2. Cannabis is not restricted to only one route. So I can take it any number of ways, where my Percocet is only one way. While cannabis can have a rewarding effect and abuse potential, stopping cannabis use abruptly does not result in any significant withdrawal symptoms, pretty much compared to caffeine. Now, I'm not saying if you smoke for 60 years, high dose, that you might have a little more of a withdrawal, but it's not as bad as heroin. All righty. This slide's primarily for our veteran population. So veterans returning from combat deployments and such see a number of medications on their drug scripts, but quite frequently the highest numbers are the antidepressants, the anti-anxiety pills, sleeping pills, and the opiates. Now, I'm sure you all know that there's an abuse potential to opiates, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety. I don't know so much about antidepressants, but on the next screen, maybe. So in 2018, CDC has this documentation of drugs that caused an overdose and a death. Not just overdoses, getting too much, going to the ER. These are overdose deaths. Please note, those antidepressants that are supposed to make me feel better, not make me want to hurt myself, there were 5,064 overdose deaths in 2018. Moving up to the benzodiazepines, 10,724. Both of these are highly prescribed drugs. And then we look at the prescription opiates, 14,975. Yeah, the other synthetic narcotics, it's phenomenal. But what's missing on this? There is no cannabis. Again, no one's ever overdosed and died on cannabis. Commonly abused drugs. This I wanted to pull primarily for our politicians, but it's also nice that our veterans see it. So looking at 6 substances that are abused, dependence, with the likelihood of dependence, withdrawal, reinforcement, tolerance, and intoxication. Notice nicotine has got the highest dependent rate. Where's cannabis? The very bottom. Withdrawal, nicotine's still at the top, cannabis is at the bottom still. The only thing that cannabis actually starts looking high on the scale is, yeah, I get a little bit high and it is intoxicating. but that's why I use it. Medical and legal implications. CBD and medical cannabis can and does interact with other medications that are being taken by the patient. It's both prescribed and over the counter. I like to bring this up multiple times because there are a number of drugs that are cleared through the liver through the same hepatic pathway, and 65% of our drugs go through there. Doing a patient training thing, I looked at a fictitious patient that was supposed to be taking 7 drugs. So it was like tramadol, tramadol, Tylenol, Motrin, and 2 or 3 others, plus the CBD and THC, all of which are cleared through the same pathways. So there is a risk when you take all these together. CBD, both broad and full spectrum, and medical cannabis can result in a positive drug screen, resulting in your loss of in a loss of work in certain professions. I used full spectrum CBD, was not using THC separately, and popped hot on a drug urinalysis for the Army. Use of CBD for treatment of childhood issues such as tantrums, hyperactivity, or attention deficit disorder can land patients in jail, and Child Protective Services can remove the child from the home. So you want to make sure that if the child is on CBD, that it is highly documented by the provider and the provider is proving. And then the potential loss of Second Amendment rights based on using cannabis. I wanted to go back and clarify that. So it's not necessarily cop finds you're smoking a joint and you lose your rights. But if you remember when you're buying a gun and if you're using the legal process, there is a question on the federal application that states, are you using any illicit drugs? So you're either stuck with lying or you're going to have to risk that one. Now, that does not make a difference if it's state approved, because still it is federally illicit. So that's how you're going to lose your children, because it's federally illicit. That's how you're going to lose your Second Amendment rights. All right, just briefly to cover Senate Bill 150. It passed in the Senate by a 28 to 15 vote. It's now in the House. Rumors have it that it'll be available to be debated in the 3M committee in April. So I started pulling the list of representatives that are on the 3M committee. There are 4 veterans, which is promising. So I'm hoping they will support us. There are 3 lawyers, which always scares the heck out of me because the lawyers tend to go overboard the other way. However, one of the lawyers is also a veteran, and he's also one of those that has sponsored his own cannabis bill. So I know he's on our backs and going to support us. So this bill covers a limited number of medical conditions backed by clinical research, such as cancer, multiple sclerosis, sickle cell anemia, PTSD, autism, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, epilepsy, terminal illness, or conditions in which opiates have been utilized or could be prescribed. That one really gets on my craw because you're going to be told that you have to take these opiates for a specific amount of time before we let you try something with less addiction potential. Love medicine. Requires a physician to recommend with a follow-up at specific times to reevaluate the benefits and side effects from using the medical cannabis. It's a very restrictive bill, does not allow for smoking flower. And we all know that that's a big problem. Flower is, of course, the quickest way to get your medicine in you. And a lot of people use that flower to make edibles. One cannot grow their own medicine, which really sucks. We'll get into the cost here in a little while. And another one that really bothers me, which I don't think our Senate has really, our government has looked at, is there is no reciprocity with other states with medical cannabis programs. So let's just say I'm a Florida resident. Every year I go stay a couple of weeks at Myrtle Beach and I'm a cannabis patient and I know that I can't transfer my cannabis from one state to another safely and legally. So I'll just get it at the dispensary there in South Carolina. Nope. So we will be shutting down a lot of people traveling to our great state. What should I be looking for when choosing a cannabis product? So when I talk to the veterans, I go in a little bit more, but I don't want to overwhelm them. But this this company provide a third-party certificate of analysis for their products? I've typically given a handout to the veterans that shows what to look for. There are so many companies out there. The best you're going to get is their lab report when the product was being picked. So it may have been, 0.3%, who knows? But who knows, did they check for pesticides and heavy metals? Again, cannabis is a bioremediator. It absorbs heavy metals, pesticides, and other harmful chemicals. I would be more fearful in smoking pot that is off the streets without a third-party analysis than I would be from the side effects from cannabis. Does this company make any claims that their product cures any specific medical condition in which is not backed by the FDA? Will CBD or medical cannabis have any effects on other prescribed or over-the-counter medicines that the patient is currently taking? Debunked theories. These are both off of the NIDA website. But is marijuana addictive? Yes, to a degree. 9% is what they state. Of the people that use marijuana will become dependent on it. I don't know how well that one's been researched. What we do see is that 17% of those who start using in their teens have a higher addiction rate. What worries me on this is so this is on a adult use model and not on a medical cannabis model. The other thing that pisses me off on the medical marijuana that I did not add into the restricted bills is the age group. So I can't remember if it's 23 or 25 that you have to be able to get a medical cannabis card from a single healthcare provider. Now, if you're under that age, you will be required 2 healthcare providers to say that you have a diagnosis that will benefit from cannabis, and that they're helping to assure that that 20-year-old is not going to have brain damage from using cannabis. Now, agreed. Remember, I'm giving this to veterans. So in South Carolina, during the early years of Afghanistan, a young soldier from here in Lexington was killed in battle. Had he have made it home and searched out to be using medical cannabis for his head injuries or other injuries, he would have had to have gotten a second physician to permit his cannabis use. Now, he was under 23, 25. But my question is why we don't have 2 separate physicians making a determination if you can go serve your country or if you can vote for a politician. It should be the same thing. If you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to use medical cannabis. And then I won't read is marijuana a gateway drug, but NIDA has pretty much blown that one out of the water. There are so many reasons that young adults or older adults may use marijuana and then may follow up with another drug. What drugs are available to children, young adults? Hey, I smoked cigarettes first, moved on to alcohol, finally found cannabis, moved back to alcohol and back to cannabis. So, if a child is going to play with drugs or a young adult, they're going to use anything. I mean, Freon out of the air conditioner. South Carolina medical cannabis concerns. These are my thoughts. These are not anybody else's proclaimed thoughts. So if there's any contradictions there, please forgive me. But again, medical cannabis should be treated the same as any other medication. That's for me talking as a nurse. Patients should not have to try multiple drugs before trying medical cannabis. These conditions that are approved are very limited. I don't have any condition that meets the criteria. However, I use cannabis to sleep and for anxiety, stress. The cost can be prohibitive to most individuals. So looking at Florida as a comparable state, because I don't know what we're going to charge. You just get your card, you're going to have to first off go see a provider for recommendation. And that can cost you between $150 and $200. And that's out of pocket. There is no insurance that's going to cover that. Almost every state has a required follow-up with that same recommending provider, which is typically $75. And then you have to pay for that cannabis card, which is typically around $75. And then we're going to go buy that first product. Okay, so we're using, I went online to a dispensary in Florida and found that a quarter ounce of flour from a dispensary, and I don't remember which name it was, but roughly $77. However, you go to my local corner friend who also sells it, and quarter ounce of flour is going to cost me $70. So we look in the little red box for that first initial dose of THC to see if it even works. Is going to cost you $352 or thereabouts. Or if I get on the illicit market, it's $70. Now, medical cannabis is a lot safer. We know that should be less pesticides, heavy metals and stuff. We can't guarantee that with the illicit drug use. And the limited amount that can be purchased at one time, which may require multiple trips to get a month's supply. Most of the states that I'm aware of, it's a single trip, but I do know that the South Carolina politicians were really trying to push the amount of THC that you could buy at a time to a lower amount. They also maybe didn't want you to get the month supply so that you couldn't stock up because, we might go out and divert that to somebody else. If I'm paying $352 for that first quarter ounce, I'm not sharing it with anybody. And I don't want my elderly patients having to drive twice a month to go get medication. Cannabis in the VA. The VA does not currently have any cannabis medicine on formulary, which we know they don't have planned. But interestingly enough, Withdronabinol and Cesmet being approved since 1985, and Epidiolex since 2018, as a veteran, these are not even available. So going back to previous talks that I've given, in my mind, does the VA really give a rat's ass about a veteran surviving? I truly think that they are just, marching the days, they just give you what they can. From the VA.gov website, the two main titles I pulled out of here is veterans will not be denied VA benefits because of marijuana use. It goes a little bit farther and it says in legal states. So my assumption is that if I tell my physician on the 31st of March that I'm using cannabis, that could get me in trouble. Let's hope not. VA healthcare providers will record marijuana use in the veteran's VA medical record in order to have the information available in treatment planning. Again, this should not be used against you, but they need to know what medications you're on, and that includes those over the counter. If you're taking, an aspirin a day, or if you're taking any herbal substances, they need to know so that they don't give you a drug that's going to interact. And if there is a drug interaction, they can encourage you to space your medications out so that there isn't an interaction. Again, the most important thing out of this whole thing is start low and go slow. This is the supporting research to the right, since I give this to my veterans in their talks, is the War-Related Illnesses and Injuries Study Center, which has the Edgewood Aberdeen experiments. I want my veterans to know that when they go talk to their doctors about cannabis and they get lied to, they can, help a little bit. All right. Any questions, concerns, thoughts? Wasn't as long as I thought. Thank goodness.
That worked out very nicely time-wise. I do have a couple of comments, questions, kind of thing.
Awesome.
One I'm going to pop onto first because it's the last thing I wrote down. While talking about S-150 and then access to medical cannabis, and you were sort of mentioning flour from Florida, but as you know, all flour has been removed out of the S-150. So I don't know if that's something you want to touch on.
I think I said in there that flour would not be available on one of the slides. I will go back and tell. But yeah,
I may have missed that.
And the problem is that in talking with nurses in other states and patients, a lot of them go buy the shake to make their canna butter. They want a product that they know and that they're comfortable with. And a lot of us like to make our own canna butter. Not me, I can't cook, but
Thank you. Yeah, I like to cook. I'd be better at cooking, I think, than growing. The idea of homegrown, I think is a great idea. I just don't, I'm the guy to grow.
Me either.
I know a lot of people that can grow better than I can, so I'd rather leave that to the people that do it better. The other excuse me. The other point I kind of wanted to make when we were talking about research from the FDA, it's not always real clear to people that the DEA is the one who controls research in the U.S. And I think it's sort of an important point to make that it's a law enforcement, not a medical or a scientific organization that controls, the research that goes into cannabis in the United States.
That's a good point.
Because my point, a lot of times you'll hear, our opponents say, well, if it was FDA approved, well, the first step in FDA approval is submitting your research. And if you're not allowed to research it by the DEA, there's absolutely no way you can submit your research to the FDA. And so to me, that's a real big kind of catch-22. That's a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a little bit of a shuffle by our opponent saying, well, it's not this. Well, it's because we're not allowed to research.
Right.
And again, not by a medical or scientific organization. So that was sort of the only other sort of thing that kind of called out to me, because a lot, like I said, often it's, oh, well, if it was FDA approved, if we had FDA approval, if it had more research, talk to the DEA about that. So, but otherwise, absolutely excellent. I like the points that you hit on your presentation, and I'm going to sort of shut up and see if anybody else wants to make any comments.
See, the Caitlin had talked about Dabney as a veteran would vote no. I wonder why he would vote no. Oh, SLED and South Carolina Sheriff's Association. Yeah. It's amazing how much power these people have over medicines when they have no frickin' clue.
Well, and that's where, again, that the DEA controlling the research, and then, law enforcement controlling everything else about it in the state. It's definitely a challenging battle. And it's sad to me to see our politicians just blindly following, law enforcement propaganda.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
My name's actually Matt. I'm just using Caitlin's computer.
Oh, okay, cool. Hey,
I
Matt.
thought it was a great slideshow.
Say again?
It was a great slideshow. I'm also a veteran and a
Awesome.
first responder now. First responders will not be able to partake with Bill S-150. And to speak about Vic Dabney, I was actually friends with the guy before he was elected. He was on my podcast. I asked him about decriminalization and legalization, and he said on recording, absolutely not. I'm going to defer to my friends in law enforcement. When the microphone was turned off, he said, I would smoke it every day and I would grow it in my backyard if I could.
Are you serious?
So that's just kind of that shows how the politicians operate.
It's where the money is.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe, mentioning that firefighters and EMTs and police officers will not be included in the medical cannabis bill, especially the firefighters and EMTs, which I am both, with the instances of PTSD involved with those jobs.
Right.
I was very disappointed that was a part of the bill, that first responders would not be allowed medical treatment.
And I think that was primarily because they're still looking at you smoke a joint on Friday night and you're still going to be high on Monday or Tuesday. If they treated it the same way they did alcohol, if you walked into work with a good buzz on, you wouldn't work. But it's a shame.
I think you'll notice when the opponents of this bill are speaking, it's always police officers and doctors there.
Yep.
You never see firefighters, EMTs, or even really nurses for that matter, that are invited to these things, because we know, I've treated dozens of opiate overdoses with Narcan. I've breathed for these patients and saved their lives. Never, ever once And I've told this to I don't know how many people. I've never had to wrestle anybody who smoked marijuana. I've never had to resuscitate anybody. Never even got a call for anybody. But they'll never ever mention that.
No. Yeah.
Thanks
Thank you for your
thanks for the
service.
slideshow. That was really.
Thank you. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
for your
Have a
service.
good.
Hopefully we'll get to meet someday. Where are you?
Yes, sir.
Where are you,
I'm
Matt?
in Cassett.
Where's that?
North of Camden, about 20 minutes north of Camden.
Okay, you're not too far from me. Cool. We'll have to meet.
No. Yes, sir. Yeah, you can come on my podcast.
Just let me know. I'm there.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
still trying
I
to get my
will.
feet
I'm
on the
gonna jump
ground.
off. I gotta.
All right,
But
nice meeting, Matt.
thank you very much.
Matt, good seeing you.
Good to see you again, Scott.
All righty. Anybody else have any comments, questions, or concerns for Mike at the moment? I see a nice comment here by Ina. I noticed one other thing, and I don't really think it was that pertinent to your presentation. But one thing I tend to stick on a lot about, and I don't know why, but I just love the idea that it was Timothy Leary who pushed the Marijuana Stamp Act all the way to the, or Tax Act all the way to the Supreme Court and found it to be unconstitutional, causing, the Nixon administration to start, scurrying to try and figure out what to do. I don't think, like I say, that's pertinent for the conversation, but the fact that the original prohibition was found unconstitutional.
And no, that actually, I wanted to put that in there, but one, I can never remember how to spell his name. I think that is an important thing. I mean, because you look at the waffling. So this plant is bad. Oh no, we need it for the war. This plant is bad. It's now considered, it's been debunked. Larry fixed, sues in court. So what? There's like a 3-year period, 4-year period. I
think
think
it was
before the
68
CSA.
when first I think it was 68, and then basically in 70 is when the Controlled Substances Act went into effect.
So we would
They
not
had
have
like
the Controlled Substance Act had Larry not have actually won. We still had the marijuana
Correct.
tax. Yeah, so it's just our government screwing us again. So
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about Nixon and the Controlled Substances Act, I almost have to mention John Ehrlichman, who, and I believe it was 1996, in an interview, stated that, did we really think marijuana was dangerous? No, but we wanted to be able to demonize the liberals, the anti-war left, and the blacks, and basically demonize them on the news every night and raid their homes and prevent them from voting against us.
right.
And basically, that's what it was. It was politics. He would, and in that Controlled Substances Act, in the first 2 years, there was a study to be done by the Schaefer Commission. And the Schaefer Commission came back in 72 with their report, and it was supposed to be about, about marijuana. And they came back recommending to Nixon that it should be completely decriminalized. And he just kind of blew up in his racist way and started talking about these damn Jews and stuff like that that don't know what they're talking about. It's going to be illegal. So he specifically went directly against the research by a committee, a governmental committee, just to again be able to stop people from voting against him.
Yep. I will try to pull those up and add it because those are very important parts.
Cool. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think those are definitely good key points. And like I said, especially that DEA blockade of research is a big thing. But
yep.
All righty, let me see if there's any other comments. Another good kudos from Josh.
I stopped sharing, by the way.
Oh, okay, cool. Anything else you wanted to add before we kind of end up tonight?
I don't think so. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome. Again, thank you for presenting to us. And I see Ina has it definitely shared on YouTube. It's live streaming out to our YouTube now. So once it's all done rendering and stuff, it'll be available to share. And we will make sure that we share it as well, probably this week on our social media.
Thank you.
with that said, I'm just going to kind of call an end to it tonight. We're at about 7:55, unless anybody wants to sort of open discussion for the moment. Otherwise, I am kind of winding down. I've been really beat this week. As you mentioned earlier, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. I don't know if that's what I get, but I get this cyclic vomiting syndrome, blah, blah, blah. I lost 15 pounds in 3 days since Saturday. I am just basically very dehydrated and I wasn't smoking large amounts of high THC content. So I don't know what it's all about. I've been going on with this for over 20 years, off and on. But anyway, it's got me kind of wiped. I'm fading fast tonight. So with that, I'm just going to kind of wrap things up and say thank you for joining us tonight. Don't forget to visit us on social media, on our Facebook, our YouTube, and our Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for new videos in case you miss our meetings. And don't forget, if you go to our website at scnormal.org, you can scroll all the way to the bottom, sign up for our monthly newsletter. Otherwise, that's it for me tonight. We will see you guys back here again next Wednesday at 7 p.m. and for another cannabis conversation here in South Carolina. That's it for tonight. Thank you all very much. Love free marijuana information. Yes, love that, Josh. All right, guys, have a great night. We'll see you soon.